All right, and just again say welcome. Welcome everyone into today's presentation. Let's see, I have a raised hand already. Okay. Just want to make sure that everyone can hear me okay. Looks like we have a raised hand from Edward. I will have everyone muted, unfortunately, because we do have too many people, unfortunately, to have everyone unmuted. But if you do have a question, feel free to type it into the Q&A or the chat. I have both those up here on my other screen. I'll be monitoring those as we go through. So otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and just assume that was an early mistake. For those of you who don't know me already, my name is Paul Reed. I am the digital marketing manager here for Advisys. And it's my pleasure to get to take you guys through today's presentation on really kind of flipping what I do on its head and talking about how you can use what we provide to create your own strategic kind of seminars or workshops, lunch and learns. There's a lot of different names for these kinds of events, but the general idea is that you have a connection to your community that you need to figure out a way to leverage. And there's no better way to do that than kind of sharing your knowledge for free. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But the general idea is that we'll both talk about the value behind these types of events. We'll talk about the key components that go into building it, step by step on how you can actually put something together in Advisys using this kind of methodology. And really, hopefully by the end of it, you'll see that it's not so scary. I think a lot of people that don't present in front of strangers often, like I do. This is probably my 100th plus webcast. I do public engagement speakings, at our shows wherever we travel to, and it's nerve-wracking. So the first thing is that I just encourage you guys to think about trying it once, because if you never try it, you can't get better at it, right? That's what I tell my daughters. So before we go into it, a little bit about myself. Like I said, I am the digital marketing manager here for Advisys. I've been with the company for 8 years, almost as long as my daughters have been alive, who just turned 10, my twin girls, so you can see there. And I've kind of done a little bit of everything here with the company. I started in inside sales, but really found my footing helping to develop some of the business that we do with enterprise clients, and being a great spokesperson for the way that we do things at Advisys, which is really with an education first format, right? For those of you who are already users or subscribers to this tool, you'll know we provide a lot of information. And the purpose of today's session is really to help narrow down what you can do with this material to mimic those that are most successful in your community, right? And as I kind of say on this slide, the real purpose of this is that identifying the most successful financial advisors and life insurance agents, they all have a strong and real connection with their community, right? So the general idea is that by doing these types of events, you're able to put yourself into your community. You're able to, network and build relationships within the community in a way that provides reciprocal value. Because at the heart of everything that we are, doing in this space as financial advisors, as life insurance professionals, we really, really need to remember that having that strong connection, that authentic connection with our community is everything. Without them, there's really no business to be had. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So before we go into the meat and potatoes of the presentation, I always like to give a little bit of an overview of what you can expect during the session today. The main thing is, it's really three different areas, right? The first I've already touched on briefly, which is the idea of a reciprocal relationship, that you hope to get business from your community, but what are they getting from you, right? It needs to be a give and take. And the idea of these events in its entirety really is that you're providing value to the community without really expecting anything in return. We hope that something comes of it, a relationship, some business, a referral, anything like that. But at the heart of what we're doing, we're really just about this idea of community and business. We're providing value in to get value out. And we'll talk about the kind of hidden value that you find in doing these events, right? Because it's not always just so cut and dry. Like, I'm not asking for your business because you showed up to this, this workshop or this lunch and learn, whatever you want to call it. We're really just trying to provide value to the community. That at the heart of what we do needs to be present. And then with the hope of being able to create catalysts, because imparting this information, and we'll talk a little bit about the different kinds of topics that you can maybe put together, a seminar or this type of event for. But at the heart of each one of those, you're really hoping to create a catalyst in that individual where, hey, I have more questions. I do want to take a next step. And we're going to give you, a call to action to leave them with, in hopes that they'll take that bait, right? But we don't want it ever to seem like this is an effort to sell them, right? This is an effort to provide value to the community. And that relationship needs to really be present, no matter what you do, right? Or whatever topic that you're considering. The second part is the event itself, the actual act of community engagement. Now, this happens in a lot of different ways, but first and foremost, we want to just help everyone understand the concept. If this is something you've never done before, you've never thought about, or you've thought about but don't really know what goes into putting on something like, a workshop or a lunch and learn or a seminar, whatever word you want to use to, encapsulate what you're providing to the community, we want to understand what the key drivers of that event are, right? Then we want to understand what type of opportunities come from this, right? Because if we're not selling them and we're not, telling them they need to come meet with me next week or whatever, trying to, backwards them into being clients, then where is the opportunity? What are we learning from doing this, right? And then lastly, out of that opportunity, what potential next steps are there, right? So we'll go through again, step by step, what it takes to kind of put something like this together, both at a high level and, kind of just from soup to nuts beyond what Advisys provides. And then lastly, really, how do you actually put together material that's compelling, right? We'll talk about what is inside of the tool that we provide, but at a higher level, really, I'm trying to, like I said at the beginning, flip what I do on its head and show you guys that it's not so hard to create value for strangers, right? If you are knowledgeable in your field of expertise. So we want to give you an intro on what we do. We want to provide you a step-by-step guide, as I mentioned. And then lastly, talk about what makes an impact for individuals, right? Because it's a mix of things. Just like we do here, I'm not just talking to our product all day. I want to have something visual to speak to. So we'll talk a little bit about that, right? Okay, so stage one, this idea of the reciprocal relationship. Without your community, there is no business, right? That might be small businesses, that might be the people around you, it might be your kid's soccer team. That's probably my first introduction to community in business is, being a part of my kid's soccer and talking with parents just casually about what I do, right? You probably do the same thing. So at first, it's going to seem a little weird to be standing up and saying, hey, look at me, I'm an expert, come listen to what I have to say. But you need to consider the relationship between you and your community a symbiotic one. It's not just you talking, it's you providing value, right? Whatever the topic may be. And we'll talk a little bit about what goes into different topics and how to actually put together that as we go along. But really the important part is remembering the relationship between you and your community, kind of like a tree. You provide nourishment and, connections with your community that can't otherwise be created, right? So you need to kind of be a part of that. It's a two-way street, and you have to remember that if you're not providing value and you're just trying to sell them, then this kind of event is not going to work. So providing the value should be at the heart of your business, period, but definitely at the heart of these type of events, right? And then, as I said, creating a dialogue is part of what you already do. So, I have a background in creative writing and kind of, in creating these kind of stories, but as a whole, you probably are already doing that. If you've sold anyone, it's probably comes from a natural understanding of who they are and what they need, right? And that doesn't necessarily come from a presentation, but more from a conversation. And so think about that as you start to put together your own concept of what a seminar or lunch and learn or workshop is going to be, is that what is the dialogue that you're having? What are the key points of that dialogue? And how does that dialogue provide value to your community, right? And then I ended this slide with a quote from Coretta Scott King, which is, the greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members. And, so what you guys are going to find is that this is going to take work. This is giving something back ultimately, right? You're not going to have a one-to-one dollar spend and return on putting something like this together. But if what you're finding is that your pool of opportunities is shrinking, guess what? A little brunch and learn, a little, something that makes it the topic approachable and fun is a great way to kind of start to fill that pool back up. So again, compassionate actions of the members of the community is really what we're focusing on when we're putting these things together, because at the end of the day, it's not a sales pitch. It is about this concept of, if I put value in and give them value, then there's going to be a value out from me, even if it's not a one-to-one sale, for every person that comes through your door, even every 10% of people. But it is about a brand awareness. It is doing stuff for your business that matters, that are not necessarily the day-to-day selling that you do, right? This is about showing that you're an expert and building passive trust, because they're going to see that you know what you're talking about without you ever asking for anything from them, other than maybe a little bit of information. Like, obviously we'll talk about things that you want to make sure you're capturing when you do these types of events. But before we get there, let's talk about this concept of value and value out. Now, I picked 4 different topics that I thought made for good seminars, workshops, lunch and learns, whatever you want to call it. I keep saying all 3 of those because depending on your perspective, right, or really depending on the audience that you're working with, you might want to pick a specific name that suits that audience, if that makes sense. So for example, if I'm heavily involved in my church and the concept that I want to put together is for personal finance and budgeting for, single parents that belong to the church, right? Basics. Then I need to make sure that all of the things surrounding that event meet the needs of the audience that I'm having the event for. They're single parents. Are they busy? Does it need to be a Zoom meeting? Maybe meeting in person doesn't really make sense. Maybe I can do something virtually. Just so thinking from the get-go about who is your audience. This is very much my marketing background speaking. Who is your audience and what do they need? What are their wants and needs? So, and then we go to the topic. So for each of these topics, the value in, right? Well, for my first example, then the value in there is just helping people better understand their debt and or cash flow. This is going to make people feel more secure about their dollars, like they're making smarter decisions. And for you, this is all about top of funnel, helping people learn better habits so that when they are ready to make that next leap, ask that next question down the line, that you are the one that they are answering it, that is answering it, excuse me. So again, sometimes it's about helping gauge where people are at, helping them feel empowered to start their financial journey. Because a lot of people, as you guys well know, don't work with financial professionals. I don't care if you're a life insurance agent or you're a CFP or anywhere in between, series license. Most people aren't actively seeking out a financial advisor or financial professional to ask these questions to. So doing these types of events allows you the opportunity to create the narrative that you want, right? Why it's important to deal with cash flow and to talk about debt, to understand good debt versus bad debt, because most people may not even understand that not all debt is bad, right? And sometimes you can earn more on your investments than your debt costs you. And just kind of understanding the basic numbers behind these. So each one of these kind of have a similar feel. If it's life insurance and asset protection, we really want people to understand that not being prepared or being caught off guard by an unexpected death, and it doesn't even have to be a spouse, it could be a parent, it could be anyone who's maybe directly or indirectly tied to your finances, right? We want to find a benefit. So if it's not directly helping them learn better habits, maybe it's just gauging the preparedness of your community. If for those of you who are not focused on life insurance, in the last year, I went to probably 6 or 8 different trade shows, conventions, sales symposiums across the board. Everyone is saying, don't forget about, and as we're coming in, actually next month, Life Insurance Awareness Month, about the importance of preparing for the unexpected death or preparing for an unexpected disability, those kinds of things, because nothing derails all of the hard work that we put into saving for the future faster than an unexpected health event, right? Whether it be death or otherwise. So sometimes we're just kind of gauging the general preparedness of our community segment. Maybe the group is not single parents in the church. Maybe it's, small business owners. And that's another one that we have down here. That's a group that grossly needs life insurance and that should be looking at life insurance as a means to help fund a buy-sell agreement, right? So never underestimate the hidden value out of helping people understand a topic. Because if you're doing it right and you're making it engaging, you're making it interactive, they're going to have questions that are going to clue you in to where they're at, right? And so the same thing goes for every topic that we cover here. So the 4 that I've chosen, the third is retirement planning. This really, I think in my mind, is more about retirement savings for the younger generation, people that maybe don't know what vehicles to use, how to make the most of your money and the options that are out there for you, how to reduce your tax liability, all the things that you kind of see. There's a guy on Instagram that I follow, Edward Verified, if you guys don't know him, great at creating content that is, helping people clarify things that maybe there's a little misinformation out there about. That's a great use for these seminars, clarifying misinformation, getting people on the right page as far as their money comes to. So when it comes to retirement planning, it's helping them figure out what their savings goal actually is. Do you even know how to figure out how much money you're going to need to retire? Right? And we can kind of work through that. So there's a million different ways that you can position the value that you're providing, but find that thread. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the key components of putting something like this together. But for retirement, we want to better understand the aptitude, right, versus the preparedness. Preparedness is, are you ready for the unexpected? Aptitude is, how much do you know, or how much do you think you know, right? Because if there's anything that I know about meeting with people, even in this business, I'll tell you, I'm not going to name any names, but people pretend to know a lot more than they actually do, right? And professionals included. So your average individual or small business owner maybe is going to say, yeah, I think I'm taken care of. But in actuality, there's maybe 10 different things that they're not even thinking of because they don't even know to ask the right questions. So in my mind, the value in for each of these topics is, what are the things that they don't know that you know? How do we transfer that knowledge from one person to the other in a way that seems like, hey, this is great. I would want other people to know this. I should tell my buddy who just opened a business to come to your next one, right? That's the general idea, is that you're providing information, but you're getting something out of it. With small business owners, and I think that's my favorite one of the bunch, is you're cultivating brand advocates with other community ties, right? The whole idea is that by doing this, you're networking yourself, you're promoting yourself, and you're networking within your community, no matter what the topic is. So with small businesses, guess what? They're a bunch of tiny little networks in themselves. They know people, they work with people, they have ties to other people in the community, just like you do. So identifying what topic that you want to cover is probably most important, but then understanding the audience, understanding the drivers behind that audience are also very important. So my little cheesy thing that I came up with for this is, be an enzyme. If you guys don't know what enzymes do in your body, they are, the way that everything kind of is able to change, or the way that you're able to use chemical compounds in your body and use them, and how they change. So be a catalyst for change. So that's kind of, I know it's a little cheesy, but really it all is about being a catalyst. You want the information that you provide to spark an interest in the topic that you're covering, or spark an interest in what you do, and maybe promote some additional questions out of that, right? All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this concept of seminars or lunch and learns or workshops. You can name it whatever you want. It doesn't have to be food driven. It's the kind of the low hanging fruit, no pun intended, on how to get people to show up, right? Everyone loves a free meal, but it does not have to be that. It can be, I say workshop because a lot of times that's how you get people to participate interactively, is you make it more of a workshop. You give them things to do, not necessarily homework, but interactive questions. And we'll talk a little bit about how Advisys and the material therein can help drive that. But let's first talk a little bit about some of the benefits of doing this and why this format really, is something that people have gone to time and time again for years now, right? This is not a new concept, but we want to understand that it does help connect with social groups, right? Whether or not you are an active member of your church or any of these groups like Rotary, Kiwanis, Elks Club, whether you actively participate in them or not, they are there, right? And they are great ways to meet people and touch your community, so to speak, right? We want to, make connections. And if you don't already do this, if you're not involved in your church or not involved in any of these groups, you really should consider joining one. Even if you have no other benefit to it than maybe getting access to people and connections, you really should you should consider that, because the next thing that these types of things do is it fosters inclusivity, right? For those people that are members of the church, that's probably the most common one that I hear people kind of tapping into, is that it helps people understand that, our faith may be what ties us together, but we understand there's a lot of other questions, and you as a member of that community, church community, you have value of your own as a professional, and you want to bring that value in there. So it's about bringing them into your knowledge, and sharing all of that, right? And that becomes something that you can authentically get behind, right? Next thing is kind of obvious, but it highlights your professional strengths, as I just mentioned. It's not, bragging. It's really showing that you are good at what you do, right? And there's no better way to gain business than having a way to showcase that, right? To highlight your professional strengths, right? The next thing is that this is a relatively low cost of entry. You do not necessarily have to have a lot to put this on, especially if you belong to any of these groups. They likely have a space that will, facilitate this type of event, whether it's a church room or, like I said, any of those social clubs. I know, people that belong to all of them, and all of them use the halls and such for this type of thing, right? Or it could just be your community center. A lot of those things are very inexpensive to rent out. You can find audio video equipment for cheap through the city and through those types of community programs. So absolutely a low cost of entry, with a high upside and exposure, right? And so, consider that all of this can be used to establish the trust and rapport that goes into earning business, right? Providing all of these things, making people feel included, highlighting the need for the planning in some of these areas. These are all very important things, but passively they are building trust and rapport, showing them that even though if they don't know you personally, that hey, maybe when I have questions, that this is the person that I should be asking it to. And furthermore, it actually should help create those questions and create that dialogue that promotes action during the event, right? And that's another thing you want to keep in mind when putting this together, is that, are you doing things that are going to create action, that are going to create dialogue? Or are you just talking at people for 30 minutes? No one wants to be, I have to do that because no one knows how to mute their mics, or else I would have everyone just asking questions, and it would be way more of an interactive thing. But, the size that we do these things, or the number of people that we invite, a little less conducive to that. But you do want to create a dialogue in this instance. You do want to have that sense of, inclusivity no matter what, right? All right, so now we understand some of the benefits behind it. What goes into putting it on? What are the components that make this type of event churn, right? The first is the topic. Now, it may seem kind of, aha, or I don't hate to say duh, but you want to keep it broad. The more specific that you get, the less you're talking to your community, right? A church is made up of many different kinds of members with many different backgrounds. This is your community as a whole. Not everyone is going to understand things at the same pace. So you want to keep the topic broad. Again, think about your audience, have a story to tell, and progress through that story, from the simplest points to the most complex points at the end. You want to build an understanding as you go along, which is kind of like exactly what we do here. We want to provide, a clear understanding of what the topic is, but we don't just hit you with the most detailed information up front. We want to build a case for the reason why we're even here. And you're going to do the same things, but think about that. Think about your audience. Think about the story that you're telling, right? Next thing is food and beverage. I said lunch and learn, but it doesn't have to be food. It can be, just the workshop. It can be, anything that you want it to be. It doesn't have to be fancy. That's the important thing. I think people tend to go a little over the top, think they need to provide something. I like the idea of brunch and learn even, because breakfast is a little cheaper. You can have a pancake breakfast for next to nothing. And, it doesn't take a lot. Just think about what your ability and scope is, and then try not to go outside of it, or start small. Those are another good tip is, it doesn't need to be fancy. You can start small, make it what you can, right? Don't overdo it, trying to make it something like this big, huge event. That's not true to who you are starting today, right? The next thing is the learning objective. This is probably the most important one. So I will say it very slowly. The learning objective is twofold. What is the number one thing that they should leave knowing? And what is the number one thing that you want to learn from having them there, or from the audience themselves? If you cannot name these things specifically, you're not ready to host an event. If you don't know what the thing is that they should know, or even better yet, the question that they should be left asking, right? And you don't know what it is that you hope to learn from this audience, why do it? I guess, is the thing. So just think about that. And then the last thing, probably right under the level of importance, is the call to action. This needs to be something that is for them, not for you. The call to action isn't, hey, let's set an appointment and talk about business necessarily. But it can be that, but it needs to be kind of flipped and it needs to be, what is the next thing that you're going to want to know? And whenever you're ready to know it, am I the additional trusted resource for that action of learning it, right? Or is it Google? Or is it another guy that you've already been talking to, right? That's really the key components, those bottom two. What is our objectives and what is the call to action? Everything else in the event is kind of up to you and your style, your personal preference. But think about these options, keeping it broad so that you apply to everyone that happens to show up. Don't overstep what you're doing from, an actual giveaway standpoint, if that's lunch or something else, right? Even that includes the handouts that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But make sure that you understand the costs going in. Just like any business, you guys know that there's, going to be a cost, but you have to just think about what the benefit is behind that, right? All right, so let's talk about specific steps that you can take, right? 1 through 10, how do we get this thing off the ground? Step 1 is kind of what we talked about, defining your purpose and topics. This is clearly defining the goal and choosing the topics that resonate with your target audience. I don't want to talk to, the single church parents about small business planning, unless they're all getting ready to start a small business, right? So make sure that the topics resonate with your target audience. Seems kind of simple, but something that you may not understand. And then think about that narrative. What is the story that you're trying to tell about why they need to ask that next question? It may not apply to everyone, but again, if you try to keep the story broad, then you have a better chance of it applying to more people, right? So again, figuring out your topic, figure out time and location. Again, depending on the audience, this will change. Select a convenient date and time for your target audience. Some of these are going to seem rudimentary, and I apologize. Some of them, but these are all important and things that if you don't think about, you may be left going, oh, that could have gone better, right? Again, things that, again, I just think about, I do one of these every month at the very least, publicly, and then privately we do an extra couple. So all of these things matter. And if you don't think about it ahead of time, it can be kind of tough to get people to show up too, right? I don't expect the single parents to be able to show up early evening on a weekday, for example, right? So just thinking about that location that can comfortably accommodate them, whether that's in person or otherwise. Think about your audience, think about who you're speaking with so that your date and time and location all align to that, right? The next is kind of the meat of what we do and what I do for these kinds of events as well. This is plan the content. It takes me a couple hours to put everything together as far as building the deck. Probably more than that, 2 or 3 hours to build the deck, but you don't have to do it this way. You can, and obviously I have more experience putting together these kinds of things, but I'll show you how you can just use Advisys to do this and just kind of run through it and have your key talking points. And it doesn't have to be an entire animated deck like what I have put together here, but you do want to have an agenda with a clear outline. You do want to think about how long you want to talk about each of these segments for, right? That matters, because otherwise, I'm guilty of this as well. You end up rambling about Lord knows what. Did it make sense? Is it tied to your original reason why people are there? Who knows? The key to a successful seminar is not just sharing knowledge. It's about building that relationship. But that relationship comes out of the way that you plan the content and structure the event itself, right? So think about the narrative that you want to have. Think about how you're going to gradually build on the simplistic part of the concept all the way to the complex part of the topic, right? All right, step 4, preparing the materials. That's really where our tool comes in. And we'll talk a little bit about, you don't have to use Advisys to do this, but guess what? We've done 90% of the legwork for you as far as how to have the conversation, what are the key topics that you want to talk about, giving you visuals that you can put together and order the way that you like. All of that is what we do. So creating visually appealing slides, you can export it to PDF and then use it right in a PowerPoint like this even. That's up to you. The only thing you can't do is just post it on your website and say it's yours and call it your own content. But you're welcome to present with it. You're welcome to use it. The mix of what we provide of text and images and charts to make the topic understandable, because everyone has a different learning modality. If you guys have been through school, you understand that the way that you learn is different than the way that someone else learns. So again, going back to thinking about your audience, that's going to inform the way that you plan the content. That's going to decide how and what kind of materials you use to make it engaging. And then the next step is really just promoting yourself, promoting your session. Post it on the Starbucks bulletin board, post it on the church bulletin board. Any channel you have, make sure that you're putting it out there, right? And if that's going to be an in-person thing, you want to make sure that you also have a lead time to that. Just like we do, like I have to start putting together all the material for the event basically a month ahead, so that I have enough time to make sure people get to know about it. You don't want to decide to do it one week and then have it the next, for example, right? So the lead time in promoting that also really matters. Giving, the more time, the better, honestly, but not too much time. You want to find the perfect amount of time, and that may take some give and take, right? Is a month, do people forget about it? Is it too much time because plans change and you can't commit to something that you don't have, a real commitment to? But you want to provide something that, in your topic and purpose that they're going to want to show up for, right? And then how you put it together and how you promote it, that might be a little bit of a tweak and change as time goes on type of thing, right? The next important thing is making sure you provide registration options. Even if it's an in-person thing, this is important because you want to be capturing who it is that's coming to these events, right? If you have someone that shows up to 2 or 3, or you're seeing the same faces all the time, you want to be able to use this ultimately for lead follow-up, even if it's not going to be today. You want to know and provide them options to sign up. That also gives you the option for reminders. So if you don't already use Zoom or a platform like that, you may want to consider, what you can do. I'm pretty sure Zoom's still free as long as you only have 25 or less people there. You can really don't have to even think about a space if you don't want to. You can offer it virtually, but you want to make sure that you're capturing that data, collecting that essential attendee information, and also finding a way to make sure that you're communicating the event details, whether it's via email or what have you. You want to make sure that you're reminding people to show up, because guess what? I invite, let's say, 50,000 people, 300 will sign up, 100 will actually show up. 50 of those people, it's a scale down as you go. So you really want to make sure that you're capturing and collecting the essential information and communicating those details effectively as you go along, right? Then preparing the venue. It seems so silly to me because I know as adults, I don't like to talk to another adult like they're not an adult. And sometimes when it comes to the basics of doing this, I have to remember that I am an experienced presenter and that not everyone is an experienced presenter. So when I say something basic like prepare the venue, show up on time, show up early, in fact, set up, test everything. Seems like something in my mind that I shouldn't have to say, but I'm going to say it because if you've never presented before and you've never done anything like this, these are the things you don't want to stress you out before people are showing up. So arrive early, test everything that you're using, make sure that you have all the seating arranged and the materials prepared so that when they get there, it looks like you're ready to go, that you're not scrambling and look unprofessional, to be honest, because that's the first impression that you're making. And everyone knows first impressions matter, right? So getting ahead, preparing the venue, whatever that might be, even just like I do. I get on 20 minutes before this thing starts. I make sure my camera's working. I do a test recording. I do test audio to make sure that when I get on, there's no hiccups. Right? We want my presentation or the delivery of my lunch and learn, my workshop, to be as perfect as it can be, which means it starts on time and that I'm incorporating relatable real life examples or interactive elements. And we'll talk a little bit of how to do that. That's going to be the second half right after this, that we talk about some of these topics and what goes into actually putting on an event for one of those topics, right? And then step 9, we want to make sure that we're fostering Q&A. Again, this seems like a no-brainer, but if you're not taking points to stop along the way when you're presenting in front of people, and there might be tuning out. You won't know unless you do that, right? So foster the question and answer, allocate time and discussion at the end of each of the segments. Don't wait till the end. Make sure that you're providing yourself natural breakpoints to ask the questions of the audience. I would do more of that here. Honestly, it's hard with the format of Zoom, a little bit harder when you can't see everyone and you're not hearing everyone as time is going on. We as human beings are so visual when it comes to the cues and things like that. So I really recommend and encourage you to do this in person if you can. But whatever works for you, honestly. So, but make sure that you allocate time, even if you're not doing it in person, to ask questions, make sure people are understanding, ask them reflective questions. If you've done any of that sales training on making sure you're not asking yes or no questions, tell me what you understood about that. It doesn't have to be a trick, but we just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. And honestly, all of that will help you enhance anything that you do in the future, because you're not going to nail it the first time. Trust me, the first time I did a webinar, oofta, very, very, very rough. But as my 100th, I feel natural. I don't feel like, even though I'm kind of sweaty right now, I don't feel like as nervous anymore. And that, so you want to make sure that you're getting that feedback, figuring out how to improve it as time's going on, so that when you do follow up and evaluate what you've done, you're informing the next time, right? We don't want all of this to be in vain. This is a practice in professionalism, in presentation, in tooting your own horn a little bit, but it is practice, right? So for follow-up, we want to make sure that we're thanking them for attending. Again, seems like a duh, but make sure that you have a formal way to do that. If it's an email, if it's a, thank you card that you send to them, however you're collecting that registration information is probably how you're following up. And then providing them additional information. At the beginning of all of this, we said value needs to be at the heart of what we do, not sales, right? Sales is a byproduct of the value that we provide. So, finding a way to give them additional resources or to continue the conversation in the days and weeks after the event. How do you think about how you're going to do that, right? So all of these steps, 1 through 10, there's probably little ones in between that you could add, to make it your own. But as a whole, if you're doing these things, you're probably starting on the right spot, right? So now, for the last bit of our time, I want to give some practical examples of actually what a seminar or workshop or lunch and learn might look like for the 4 topics that I covered at the beginning, right? That's your personal finance, that is your life insurance, your saving for retirement, and then working with small business owners. And I took some time ahead of this to put these together. So if you're here today and you're already a subscriber to Advisys, I'd be happy to make those a template for you, or to give you the client file so that you can use it as an example, or even to use it as a basis for yourself, right? I, obviously put my own spin on it, but I want to make sure that you guys understand that this is not hard to do. The time is in the practice and in the actual presentation, not in the building of the materials, right? That takes only a few minutes. So what I did is I came into Advisys, and for those of you who are unfamiliar with Advisys, this is kind of what it looks like. It kind of looks blank when you first come in, and there's a reason for that. We, unlike a lot of tools, are not a traditional financial planning tool, nor are we a traditional marketing tool. We're really, at the core of what we do, a plan and presentation tool. And that really speaks to and is shown in this type of topic, where we're looking at, so are we getting slides and a replay? We have a question. Thank you, Mira. Slides and a replay, or can we use it? Can we use it in our presentation? Okay, so Mira, here is what you get. I can provide you, the deck is not for public use. What I presented prior to this moment is not for public use. Everything that I'm going to show you after now, which is all the material that's inside the tool and all the files that I've put together, absolutely happy to provide you if you're already a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber already, I encourage you to subscribe, and you'll get access to these extra deliverables and stuff when you attend these webcasts, right? Otherwise, you're welcome to use this material or use the concept of these topics, what the points that I make on your own. But Mira, excuse me for not knowing if you are a subscriber or not. I would have to say it kind of depends. You will get a replay of the event in its entirety, so you can kind of think about the steps that I outlined. I think that's what you're asking as far as the slides are concerned. Actually, I take that back. I will provide the PDF, but it will be locked and cannot be used for public dissemination, I guess. So if you're here today and you just for the purpose of remembering the steps of putting something like this together, I get that I'm giving a lot of information. I will provide anyone who wants it, the deck in a locked format, so you can reference that. Otherwise, again, if you're a subscriber, I'm happy to provide you any and all of the information and the materials that I've put together moving forward. So without further ado, our first practical example is going to be for personal finance. And, as I mentioned, for those of you who are not aware of Advisys, us not being a traditional tool, you're going to find a lot of different materials in here. The three main components that I use to put anything together, whether it's an actual plan for a client or a seminar or lunch and learn in this case, comes from these tabs: the analysis tab, the subject tab, which is the bulk of what we're doing today, and then the calculators tab. These are the 3 bits of information that I can use to put this stuff together, right? And from those 3 tabs, I selected for personal finance probably about 20 different reports that altogether combined are probably about 50 some pages. It's a lot of material, definitely enough to cover in half an hour or 45 minutes, right? For one topic. So as we go through here, remember, you don't want to do too much at once, right? Think about the amount of time that it's going to take to talk about the particular topic, the different sections they're in. And a good way to do that is by using one of the things that we have in here that is an agenda, right? An agenda is just a great professional tool to have no matter what you're doing. A lunch and learn, no exception, but it allows you to set the stage for the different topics and areas that you're going to speak to, right? Do we have a template for budgeting? Can we schedule a meeting, pursue more about subscribing? Absolutely, Mira. If you go to our website and you go to the schedule demo button, just let them know in the they'll give you an empty space where you type in kind of what you're looking for your meeting. So let them know you attended the webinar, you want to know more about personal budgeting, and they'll tailor whatever we talk to you about to make sure that we talk about those things. But you'll probably get a really good sense of that particular topic right here as we go through this. So when it comes to personal budgeting, there's a few things that I always like to make sure that I impart to people. One is you're not doing this alone. There are teammates that you're going to need to get to where you need to, or where you want to be, right? And some of those teammates are your family. Some of those teammates are professionals like a financial advisor or an insurance agent or, an estate planner. There's a lot of people. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about the basic idea of time and money. This is one that I think a lot of people in budgeting and in deciding how much is the right amount to save for the future really underestimate, especially now. Inflation is higher than it's been in a long time, since like the 70s and 80s. So we want to understand how that impacts what we're doing, how the debt that we have impacts what we do, right? So to Mira's question, sometimes you're going to the basics, talking about personal finance, cash flow. In a workshop, you may even give them, and at the end of these, you'll see there's a couple worksheets that we have that you can kind of leave them with. That call to action might be, in this case, making sure that they take the time to write down and actually write their budget out in full, right? Yeah, we know more or less what goes in and out, but are we really taking control of our money? So as we go through this type of seminar, I would say, hey, you're not doing this alone. But you're the captain of the team, right? And that's what this particular report highlights. So the way that you can present can be different. I like, and I do not see a problem with doing it just like this, saying, hey, this is the material that we're going to cover on the left, and we're going to go one by one, and we're going to talk about the key components of each topic, right? And you can present it just like this. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint. You can just scroll and say, hey, these are the team members. You're the captain. I'm the planner. We need maybe an investment specialist. Maybe these people are one and the same. You probably need a CPA to talk about your taxes. You're going to need a little bit from every one of these areas, right? But the point is that you're not doing it alone. That's why we're having these events. Then we're going to talk about some of the things related to the area of personal finance, like debt, managing your debt. What debt is good? What debt is bad? How do you repay debt? This is all great general information that you can say. You can also make interactive. How many of us here have student loans? Right? How many of us are still paying on those loans, right? Do we understand that? Are we paying more than the minimum? And just do like basic polling of the audience to kind of get people understanding that everyone has debt. Everyone is dealing with these kinds of things, but maybe not everyone understands that paying your debt isn't always the best option. That sometimes that, your debt or your investments can earn more than your debt can cost. So this is where I start going, I'm teaching concepts. I'm teaching financial concepts in a way that becomes visual and easy to understand. And I use real life examples like the interest on your home mortgage, which is also deductible, versus the interest, the tax return on your investment, and whether or not that interest rate is taxable, to kind of show you a real world example. Now, depending on your audience, again, thinking about your audience and who they are, you can decide what these numbers are. I use some of these calculator examples, and I've plugged in numbers that I think are realistic, but you can use your own real world examples. Another great way to talk about personal finance is by showing, that there's more than one way to approach handling your money. So I always use an example of things that everyone buys, like a car, right? For a family, it's a minivan, a $40,000 minivan, nothing crazy, right? But if we don't put any down and we're paying 5%, we can kind of see what it's going to cost us over time. But this is where I start to differentiate the idea of simple interest versus compounding interest. I will explain to them that there's a lot of different ways to approach paying down debt. And in this instance, just by taking the approach of making a biweekly payment, we're calling it mortgage here, but this could be a car payment, that we can kind of see that there's ways to save some of that money that we're paying in. So there's different ways that you can talk to a specific subject, but the vehicles in which you do it are almost always the same for each topic, meaning you're going to have an educational component that is making sure that we're all on the same page. That's the stuff like, why do you need to check your credit report? Who's on the financial planning team? How does interest or inflation work, right? And how does it impact your money? This is all the base level understanding, the basics, the lead in, if you will. And calculators are pretty basic too. But as you start going down and we start understanding that, now we understand what inflation is. Now we're going to start to get a real world look at that same minivan that we wanted to buy and how much it's going to cost us in 25 years. If the average cost of inflation stays what it's been, it's just like 3.25% over the last 20 years, right? So this is where your personal view as a financial planner or as an insurance planner is going to come into view. How you shape the way that you tell the story will be shown in these numbers, right? If you think inflation is going to be outrageous, you want to show that outrageousness and why it's important to start planning today. So again, we're not telling them that they have to come work with you, but we do want them to understand what the variables are that are there, regardless if they work with someone or not. And those variables are sometimes crisscross over topics, but you'll decide which variables which things you want to highlight. So, when it comes to saving money, I always like to show the rule of 72, because if you don't understand, risk, the higher the risk and the investment, the shorter amount of time it takes to double your investment, the lower the risk, the longer it takes. All of these play into the idea of procrastination. When do I start? How long does it take me to get to my goal? Do I even know what my goal is? Now, again, personal finance is the building block for every other topic out there. If you don't know how to do personal finance, you're probably not a small business owner already. So, but this is a really good low barrier of entry, something that can apply to everyone, that you can use to start out with. I think personal finance is the best of the bunch that you can just get comfortable with. You're not going into too deep of topics. It really is about understanding the time value of money, all those things that I outlined in the agenda. Time value of money, debt, is it good, is it bad? What is compounding interest? What is simple interest? How do I know which is which and when to pay things and when to not pay things? All of that can be shown in these simple formats, right? The cost of procrastination. This one's great, because if you're telling me that you think $1 million is the amount that you need to retire, but you're not saving for that yet, not saving for that million. Today, earning 5%, which you can use whatever data you want for the products that you sell. Can these slides go landscape so they fit the screen better? So actually, Thomas, what you would do if you wanted to fit it to the screen better, it's all formatted to print, but you can actually use this little button right under the phone number here that is the full view. And you can kind of play with it like this, if you will, but it does not, because these are all PDF, they do not format back and forth between landscape and portrait. But what I would suggest is the way I like to do it. I'm a PowerPoint nerd. I'm really good at it, like disturbingly good at it from my years at Honda and how many times I had to do it. So I use a lot of our graphs just in my own slides so I can make it the layout that what I want. But otherwise, your options are full screen or not full screen, right? Zoom or not Zoom. Not everything is going to be formatted. Most of them are formatted well so that you can fit it at least in a viewing panel that is easy to see in one shot, but they do not necessarily go landscape. There are some that are, because at the heart of what we are presentation-wise is face-to-face, they do format it for a letter so that everything paginates and fits to an 8.5 by 11 print. So hopefully that answers that question. Again, the topic is irrelevant, but you're going to have the same components. Some are going to be textual, helping people get on the same page. Some are going to be example-based, like what we have in these calculators, helping people understand the relationship between money time, and risk, right? All of those three things are very important, regardless if you're talking about life insurance, you're talking about just day-to-day expenses, you're talking about planning for the future in any capacity, right? So this took me about 15 minutes to put together, to find the material, to go, okay, I like this order better than this, whatever. You can make it more, you can make it less. But at the end of it, what you can do for every one of these topics, and I want to make sure I'm being mindful of my time here, is that you can bind it, you can have it sitting on the table ready for them to review when they come into the room, right? So I'd make 20 copies of this, I'd brand it with my stuff, I add these little touches like header and footer, which you'll see when it kind of generates here, so that what they have when they sit down for my workshop or my lunch and learn is something that looks nice, looks professional. Guess what? This is for everyone. You can take this home with you, but on every page, and I've included things like getting to know me. This is where you can include your business philosophy. You can include a little bit about yourself and you're in the community. And, you know, that's up to you. But we give you all these different things that kind of allow you to make this a handout, a takeaway, but also tie back to your personal brand. So again, little touches. You can email me anytime. Here's my email address. If you have questions, more questions about this topic, reach out here. You control all of these little touches as well. And then, you know, all the pieces that I've come up with. The agenda, you know, everything's just formatted the way that we put it together. But you can control what it looks like, how to kind of make it your own, so that when they come in, it looks like a workshop. Frankly, I mean, that's the best way to put it. It looks like what they're there for. It doesn't look like you're just there to sell them, or it's not a product brochure or a whiteboard, empty whiteboard, and you're just Google, you know, doodling things on for 30 minutes. It's something that they can follow along to, that you have key points that you can make as you go along, that at the end, that you can have a clear call to action for. And in the personal finance one, that clear call to action is something simple. Let's make sure we give you a budget worksheet to do on your own. You know, what is your current budget? What do you think it is? And then a month later, let's touch base and just see if you were right. Did you actually spend what you thought you spent over that month? Or maybe are we kind of not on top of it as we thought? They don't have to do anything with this related to following up with you, but guess what? They will have your information if they need to, right? It's all there in the packet. So that's the one example. You know, for time's sake, I'm going to kind of have to be a little bit more brief on the others, but I do kind of want to show you that depending on what you're here for, that these types of examples and type of material can be put together for any of the 4 topics that I mentioned. For life insurance, my agenda looks a little bit different. You know, what are we actually protecting? Why is it important to plan responsibly? The basics of life insurance. And then we go more into the topics like everyone needs to know, and you can incorporate this into personal finance even if you want, like Social Security, talking about, you know, what type of benefits am I going to receive? Who gets them? When? What about the blackout period? I know I'm kind of going very quickly here, but all of those components are represented in here, right? What is the purpose of buying life insurance? Are there more than one purpose to buying life insurance? Are there purposes or considerations in buying life insurance that I'm not even aware of? Like, you know, cash value life insurance, that's a big one. We have a brand new report in here. Actually forgot to include it. I'm just going to type using. Here's a good example of our search functionality. I know the report is called using cash values to fund retirement. So I'm just going to type the word using in, and I'm going to type and I'm going to hit enter. And I know that any title of the word using that has the word using in is going to pop up here. So I have the cash value life insurance one, but I have a specific one to funding retirement that talks about how cash value life insurance works, when to consider it, you know, how it can be used to access, you know, to access the cash values they're in, all of those kinds of things. So again, where I'm not selling them the policy today, what I am doing is informing them that this type of policy exists, so that when they decide that it's time to ask more questions, not only do they know to ask the right questions, but they know who to ask questions to, right? If you purposely are vague in certain areas, great, that's not a bad thing. We want to lead them wanting more, right? But I do want to make sure that what I am providing is of value, that they take away from the event some extra understanding that they did not have before, even if that understanding and the only purpose of that understanding is to tell their family about it. Awesome. You've done your job in providing value to the community. So what Advisys does is just facilitate the discussion, right? We create the conversation for you because the reports are intended to be talked through, right? So life insurance, we get it. Those are the key points. for retirement, this is really where you kind of can make it what you want. Retirement planning is so in depth. You know, what you do and the vehicles and the ways that you get to your financial goals are wide. It's the ocean out there. You know, financial planning is an ocean, right? What we want to do for clients and for people in our community is provide some sort of life jacket so that before they, or actually forget that analogy, it is the ocean, but we don't want a life jacket. We want them to wade into a bay before they even decide to swim in the ocean. That's the purpose of these events, is to help them wade into the bay, make them understand that yes, it's complicated. Yes, you're going to have questions. If you don't have questions, then I'm not doing my job, right? But you want to understand the landscape first and foremost. So when it comes to retirement, we're talking about how long you're going to live. That informs how much money you're going to need, obviously. If you're only going to live to 67, then you really don't need to worry about retirement that much, right? But if you're going to live to 97, you don't want to run out of money. So again, identifying the goals, knowing how to ask the questions of them, we're going to do that for you. If it's retirement peace of mind, which is a very important concept to talk through, then there's soft questions that you can use to ask them to ask of themselves. Do I feel content and comfortable about how I'm going to spend retirement? Do I have many worries about what might happen during retirement? That's health related, things like that. So all of that is built into these reports. It's up to you to decide what order to put them in, how many or little to use for your session or seminar, but all of the materials, all of the components to make it engaging, to make it interactive are going to be represented in the material that Advisys provides, right? So for retirement, and I'm getting super close on time here, you know, it's about understanding the idea of investments, that there is no perfect investment, you know, coming back to not having an emotional response to our money, that we have so many great reports in here that unfortunately, I thought originally I was not going to have an hour. I wasn't going to be able to do 45 minutes to talk about this topic. But as I started building it out, I was like, man, there's a lot here. And I could probably do a specific webcast on building a seminar for these specific topics too. But alas, we are going to run out of time. So I'm going to have to leave it there and say the small business seminar is probably the one that you should look into the most. So if you don't subscribe already, you know, look up on our website or in our tool for the webinars. We've done webinars that talk about the specific content for small businesses, but hopefully you get the gist or the idea of how the material within the tool itself really is the bulk of what you need to actually put something like this on, right? It doesn't have to be a full-blown PowerPoint like what I do here. I like a mix of both because the PowerPoint gives me the narrative control as opposed to the content is the content and you can't change it, right? But the content is great for the educational component of it. So let's talk about what it costs. That's the last piece of this. You know, if you think there's some value and you don't subscribe, you have two basic flavors that you can get. You have the educational component that will give you everything you need to put on these seminars, honestly. The only thing it doesn't do is give you the next step of where they're going to go when they're ready to ask that next question, the analysis, determining if the individual are actually saving enough or doing enough or have enough life insurance. All of that comes into and that's more of what people think of the traditional planning tool, is the needs analysis, data in, data out. All of that is the $798 price point. But I'd argue you don't need any of that to actually put on a seminar, to put on a lunch and a learn, to host something for your community. All of that can be done for $599 a year, basically. So as I say on the slide here, both of these plans, if you've never subscribed before, come with 60 days to try it out. That's enough time to actually do one of these in my mind, to put it together, put the material together, you know, work with us because all of the training and support is included. You can actually call us and say, hey, you know what? Mr. Advisys person, I'm looking to do a seminar or a lunch and learn on this topic. Could you help me find the material that might, you know, help me talk about the things that I think are important, which are these 3 things or whatever. We'll do that with you. I don't know a lot of other tools that are a partner in your success like that. So, you know, this was a real fun exercise for me because obviously I do this as a job. I put together presentations that I don't necessarily get anything out of. I don't expect everyone to buy, but I do hope that everyone gets something of value out of this or sees or thinks at the very least, you know what, maybe I should think about doing something like that in my community, or have been thinking about how to interact with the people around me a little bit better as far as my business is concerned. hopefully at the very least, you get something out of it for that. At this point, I am 1 minute from the hour that I promised to take from everyone. So I'm going to leave it, for anyone who has time to ask questions, I'll leave it open. But otherwise, I just want to thank you guys for being here. It is, I don't want to do this for nothing. So hopefully you get something out of it. And if you do have questions or feedback, ways that I can improve, things that you'd like to see us talk about, topics, by all means, I'm all ears. Otherwise, again, my name is Paul Reed, and I'll just hang on for the last couple minutes to make sure that we get everyone else's questions answered. Looks like there's one other one just about approval or compliance. If you've been invited to this webcast, you already belong to a company that is compliance approved by us. If you're not sure the scope in which we are approved, by all means, just reach out to us. We'll talk to you about if we have a private label version. Some companies have their own, proprietary version that is not the retail version, that may even have a lower cost point. That $7.98 is probably the highest price that you'll pay. They subsidize it a lot of times. So reach out if you have any questions. Call us. I should probably leave that contact information up. Last slide. See, even sometimes, as many times as I've done this, I forget. There's one more slide. How are they going to call you, Paul? How are they going to reach out? Go to our website. There's a little chat bubble. That's probably the easiest way. Otherwise, answers@advisys.com or the 800 number on the bottom of the screen. If you have questions about pricing, about approvals, compliance, et cetera, please reach out. We may also reach out to you to ask, for feedback. Feel free to provide it or not. But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. Hopefully we'll see you again at our next event. And I guess that's it. Take care. Everyone have a great day. Is that a question, James? How difficult is it to put a presentation onto PowerPoint? That honestly would depend on your experience with PowerPoint. I don't find that it's that difficult because you can import PDFs directly into PowerPoint now. And so I should say it depends on your level of usage with PowerPoint. It also depends on the version of PowerPoint that you're running. If you're on Windows 10 or 11, it's probably a lot easier than an older version. What I would say is that every computer, for those of you still here listening, every computer has a snippet tool. My favorite and easiest thing to do is to snip the parts of the reports that I like, and then just use that as an image that I paste into a slide. That's probably it's a little rudimentary. You don't get it as clean of a look maybe as you could, but it absolutely is very simple to do in that way. So 2 ways: either snag it, grab it and paste it in, or you can import PDF or Acrobat into a PowerPoint directly, but it is going to be formatted like the page would be, again, to Thomas's point, in a page format. So you may want to consider that landscape format. I will say it is something we're aware of, because this has been a PDF format for so long and you can't just automatically change it from one to the other. We are in the process of creating HTML versions for every one of our 900 reports. So when that happens, you'll actually have the ability to go back and forth in formatting. It'll repaginate, et cetera. But it's a big undertaking because of how much content we have, and the fact that we continually add content and all that. So hopefully, if you have questions, you need pointers, by all means, reach out to me. You can get my contact information if you call into the company. I don't mind talking with you. I have a lot of experience building presentations and doing this type of event or doing live events. So by all means, if I can help you, I'm more than happy. Add me on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message. I'd be happy to reach out and do what I can for you. So otherwise, hopefully that answers your question. And let's see if I got any others. Nope. Okay. Well, folks, I again appreciate your time. I'm going to go ahead and end my camera session and the recording, and bid you all a wonderful afternoon so I can continue on with my day. Take care.